creditors and the financial creditors ought to take more haircut was not justifiable, and therefore the equitable treatment was then clarified by the Supreme Court in this matter, a case study which I just dealt in, and it clarified that the similarly situated creditors would be treated equally. That means if a secured creditor is there, say for example bank A, bank B, bank C, bank A and B are secured financial creditor and bank C is an unsecured financial creditor, and XYZ Limited is an operational creditor of a company which is undergoing CIRP. A resolution plan is approved by the COC, and in that resolution plan, A is getting, so A had more security interest than B, and A, B being secured financial creditors were paid more than C because C was an unsecured financial creditor. Now, between A and B as well, there was a discrimination through which A was being paid 10% higher than what was being paid to B. Am I making sense? You can raise your hand if you don't understand my example. And for the question answer part, we'll take it at the end of the session. So if you don't understand any of my
ma'am,
points, yeah, all right.
We are at
All
par
right.
right now.
All right, all right. So you have an option of raising hand, so that you can use if any of you is having any trouble in understanding what I'm saying or following up. So if A and B, the similarly situated creditors, are not being paid equally, then Supreme Court says then the equitable treatment or the principal equity shall be coming into force. However, if A and B are being paid similarly and C is not being paid similarly, being an unsecured financial creditor, that will not be a violation of equitable treatment. Same goes while we treat the operational creditors. It is not at all necessary after the SR judgment that you treat the financial creditor and the operational creditors at par. So what the law is today, that you treat them differently, you treat the similarly situated creditors in the same manner. However, you cannot prejudice a dissenting financial creditor. That means a financial creditor who has dissenting financial creditor is a financial creditor who is not voted for the resolution plan. However, the resolution plan is still approved without approval. So that financial creditor shall not be prejudiced just because it could not or it did not vote for the resolution plan. So I think I am quite clear about the similarly situated creditors with this respect. And therefore, the discrimination between the financial creditor and the operational creditor is done away with by virtue of this judgment. Before this, there was a dilemma as to how to deal with the interest of the operational creditors, because they can't be treated equally as long as the financial creditors are still there in queue. And therefore, it further went on to explain the principle of equality, in which it says the equality principle cannot be stretched to treating unequals equally. That's what I explained through my example, that the status of an unsecured financial creditor, operational creditor, or any other secured operational creditor. So these belongs to different stratas of being a creditor, and therefore they are unequally and they are unequal. They cannot be compared. So one class cannot be compared to other class, and they cannot be treated equally just because it is a code and it is a very new statute and it has come to provide the relief to everyone. It is not a recovery forum. And the main aim is to revive the company with a financial support and to revamp the company. And therefore, it would destroy the very objective of the IBC if at all the unequals are made equal. And then the Supreme Court also upheld the COC's ability to distinguish between secured financial creditor based on the value of their respective security interest, which I just explained. So now now subclause B of section 30 subsection 2 deals with payment of operational creditors. So payment of operational creditors shall be paid in priority. That is for sure, because that is also provided under regulation 38, and they shall be paid in priority, and which shall not be less than the amount to be paid to such operational creditors in the event of a liquidation under of the corporate debtor under section 53. Now let us go to section 53, which says which basically uh, tells us about distribution of proceeds under liquidation. So this is the waterfall mechanism, the eminent waterfall mechanism, which has been brought into place under the purview of the code. And but this reference has also been dealt under section 30. So this doesn't mean that this will be only used when the company is in liquidation. You have to refer while you are putting up a resolution plan for voting approval, or if you are a resolution applicant, then you are putting up your resolution plan for approval before the COC. Then you will have to keep these things in mind, because this is the main waterfall mechanism which is referred to in the code. And it says that notwithstanding anything contained whatever as may be specified, namely the insolvency resolution process cost and the liquidation cost paid in full. So the insolvency resolution clause cost, which I understand that all of you must be aware that while running a CIRP, there are few costs and which are inevitable in nature. They cannot be avoided, they cannot be ignored. Even if there is a dead company, the resolution professional, the other professionals who are acting for resolution professionals, and if it is a running company, then the running cost of the company, all of those costs during or incurred or accrued during the insolvency corporate insolvency resolution process of the company constitutes to this cost, and liquidation costs which are taken as an estimate are to be paid in full. And therefore so we were talking about payments to operational creditor under section 30 subsection 2. So they should be paid minimum what they are to get under the liquidation of a company. So where do they rank as an operational creditor of a corporate debtor? Anyone in the chat box can write to me. Where is it mentioned, like under the section 53, where are they paid? I'll wait for 30 seconds more.
Hello, ma'am. Here I have a question, ma'am. I have a question here, ma'am. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Please go on.
Ma'am, does every operational has a liquidation value?
We'll have the Q&A at the end.
Okay, sure.
Right. Yeah. No, so I was asking for a answer from all the audience here. Can they let me know where the operational creditors here lies? Okay, I'm unable to get any answer though. Okay, so the workmen and the operational creditors constitutes workmen dues also. So they are paid at last. Somebody just answered me. So they are paid at last. However, few operational creditors, which constitutes the workmen's and employees, they are paid in priority. So what they ought to get under section 53 subsection 1 of the code, they should be getting at least that much amount while the resolution plan under section 30 subsection 2 is being approved. So the resolution professional and the COC shall take this into consideration. Otherwise, all the operational creditors are paid at the last, and they lie at the bottom of the waterfall mechanism. Then the second part of the subclause B is that the amount that they would have been paid to such creditors if the amount to be distributed under the resolution plan had been distributed in accordance with the priority in subsection 1 of 53, which relates to the workmen and employees dues, which I will come later on as to deal in detail as to which all workmen are paid in priority and which all employees are paid in priority and for how many months. Because if a company is shut for 5 years, the employees and the workmen cannot expect the liquidation cost or the liquidation estate or under a resolution plan, the resolution applicant to actually pay for their entire life or either for 5 years. So there is a time limit which has been provided, which says that beyond a certain limit or the stipulated time, the workers or even in the matter of employees will not be paid. So there's a time limit which is provided, and this has to be paid in priority. And then section 30 subsection 2 also deals with the payment for the dissenting financial creditors, which says provides for the payment of debts of financial creditors who do not vote in favor of the resolution plan and in such manner specified by the board. So here board is Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board, and for this you need to refer to the CIRP regulations, which shall not be less than the amount to be paid to such creditors in accordance with subsection 1 of section 53. Now we again go back to section 53 of code of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. The first payment clause is the CIRP cost and the liquidation cost. Second is payment of operational debts, strata of operational debt, which includes workman dues for the period of 24 months preceding the date of liquidation commencement date. So if your liquidation commencement date is 1st January 2019, then for the last 2 years, that is from the commencement of the liquidation commencement date, that is 1st January 2019, the period of 24 months from the date, that is 1st January 2017 till 18 and then till 19. So 17 to 18, 18 to 19. These 24 months will be paid, all right, for all the workmen. And then this is a very tricky part of the section of this section, and I would actually urge you all to read this section on your own and read some case studies out of it, because this is a very crucial part of this section, which deals with the payment of secured financial creditors or a secured creditor per se, because there might be a secured operational creditors as well. So the debts owed to a secured creditor in the event such secured creditor has relinquished security in the manner set out in section 52. So I'm not getting into the details of the relinquishment and everything. However, I would like to confine myself and explain it in a example format, in which I would say that there was a bank, there was a secured creditor, and it was a secured financial creditor, namely Bank of India. Let us just use it for example, hypothetically, and it had a security of around immovable properties and some movable properties of the corporate debtor, and it had duly registered its charge on the MCA portal as per the provisions of the Companies Act 2. And therefore, while the company was in CIRP, it could not have relinquished or it could not have invoked its security interest while the company was under CIRP. However, in the event when the liquidation commence for a corporate debtor, every financial creditor has an option to either relinquish their security interest into the liquidation estate to the liquidator, or take away their rights along with the security interest and give up their benefits under the code, and they take it outside the purview of the code, and then they sell it off on their own. So the debts owed to a secured creditor, in the event secured creditor has relinquished. So if you're a financial creditor, secured financial creditor, and you have relinquished your interest to the liquidation estate and you want it to be treated as per the liquidation process under the code, then you will be ranking at this stage of being paid. All right, when as and when the liquidation estate is being realized and the liquidator starts to pay off its debts. The third subclause is wages and any unpaid dues to employees other than workmen. So workmen are already covered here under subclause B, and after being paid to the financial creditors, there comes the payment to the employees apart from the workmen. But they are only paid for the last 12 months preceding the liquidation commencement date, unlike the workmen who are paid for 24 months. Then financial debts owed to unsecured creditors. So this is a category of payment to unsecured creditors who do not have any security interest, and therefore they could not have had the opportunity of giving up the security interest and being under the clause 2, subclause 2 of clause B of this section, and therefore they rank at the at this juncture of the waterfall. Then I will do that once I take the session. Yeah, all right. I'll just complete this part of mine, and then I'll probably go into detail of subclause B of section 53. Therefore, the government dues rank below the unsecured financial creditor, and they also include the amount to be received on account of Consolidated Fund of India and Consolidated Fund of a state, if any, in respect of whole or any part of the period of 2 years preceding the liquidation commencement date. This is a very practical aspect when you run a liquidation, basically. So this you will come to know once you deal with it. I mean, very practically and closely. The third part of it is under clause E itself, debts owed to a secured creditor for any amount unpaid following the enforcement of security interest. So those financial creditors who are not covered under subsection A of 53, they are covered here, in which it is said that the debts owed to a secured creditor for any amount unpaid following the enforcement of a security interest. So I would like to take 2 minutes for this topic, because I would like to deal in the practical. When you don't release or relinquish your security interest to the liquidation estate and to the liquidator of the corporate debtor at the commencement of the liquidation proceeding, you take out the security interest and you try to deal it on your own. Now, when you go and sell off that security interest or put that security interest on auction, you might not recover as to what the due stands to be paid to you, and therefore there remains some amount still to be repaid by the company, and therefore you go and claim before the liquidator. Like say for example, if I had to recover 700 crores from the corporate debtor, and you could not recover 700 crores and you did not relinquish your security interest, and you realized somewhere around 600 crores from the property which you had as a security interest, and then you have remaining 100 crore to be recovered. You make a claim before the liquidator, and then you will be ranking at this juncture of the waterfall mechanism, and then you will be covered and paid here proportionately. And then after being paid to everyone, then then the liquidator pays to the remaining debts and dues who are covered here, the operational creditors, the trade creditors basically, and those still remains to be paid, and then they are paid here. After that, if there are preference shareholders in a company, they are paid, and after that equity shareholders or partners, as the case may be. The only thing is that the waterfall, if the company is put into liquidation proceedings initiates, the waterfall mechanism is highly unlikely to reach at this level to be paid to the equity financial credit to the equity shareholders or partners. And then there is an explanation which clears the doubt as to how would you distribute the liquidation estate or the liquidation realization amongst the creditors or the basically the payees on which you will have to make the payment. How will you make the difference and how will you make out the difference and pay them? So if you're paying to wages to the workmen under this subclause 1, and you are also ought to be paying to the financial creditors, that to secured financial creditors, how will you be distributing? So this clarification has been provided under this section. And then the fee payable to the liquidator shall be deducted proportionately from the proceeds payable to each class of recipients, and then the liquidator fee is also paid in this manner. So what your key takeaway should be, because under the earlier regime of winding up under Companies Act 1956, there was a sort of similar manner which was provided for making the payments to the creditors out of the government dues, out of the liquidation proceeds to the creditors of the corporate debtor. What are the major important changes which are brought in under the regime of the code vide section 53? This says it puts government dues to a position below unsecured lenders. However, in the earlier regime or under the earlier statutes, there was always a thing called the crown debt, and therefore the government dues having the stature of a crown debt were used to be paid before the unsecured financial creditor, basically. And then it goes on distinguishing between the financial creditors and operational creditors, putting the former in priority over the latter. And therefore, this difference is also now dealing under the resolution plan when it is being approved after the SR judgment. And thirdly, by putting the unrealized part of a secured creditor's claim who enforces security interest outside liquidation to a position subordinated to the unsecured creditors. So as we have seen that the unsecured creditors are being paid before we are going on making the payment to the secured financial creditor who have not relinquished their interest and they have opted out of the liquidation. Therefore, it is basically a temptation given to the secured creditors to join the queue in winding up and gain priority rather to wait till the end and being paid if they do not realize anything outside the liquidation purview. Now I would just quickly take you through the regulation 38, which provides for mandatory contents, and it again provides for operational creditors who shall be paid in priority over the financial creditors, and to the dissenting financial creditors. So basically the dissenting financial creditor, again to re-emphasize on this, who had the right to vote but who did not vote in favor, yet the resolution plan was approved, they shall be paid in priority over financial creditor who voted in favor of the resolution plan. So this is the present statute which provides for the payment of creditors and everything. Now, this is a kind of a template which is provided as to what shall be the structure and distribution under regulation 8 and read with section 30 subsection 2 for the payment to the different creditors. What does it say? So the heading reads as treatment of various stakeholders. This is somewhere a template of a resolution plan in which you need to put in the distribution and everything as to how the funds to be distributed, either to a operational creditor or to a financial creditor. So the first, obviously we need to pay the CIRP cost in full. Then comes the workmen and employees. How are we dealing with workmen and employees? How much haircut are they going to bear because of our approval of resolution plan? And then how much the financial creditors are being paid, how much operational creditors are being paid, and also it should be mentioned in the resolution plan that the operational creditors shall be paid in priority to the financial creditors, and then how the shareholders are being treated. And then while the resolution plan is approved, uh, a form H is filed by the resolution professional, in which he basically lists all the matters which are there for consideration of COC and for their approval. And therefore the payment to the operational creditor and financial creditor are paid in equality, and he should ensure, and the COC shall also ensure that there is no discrimination in payment of a financial creditor or an operational creditor. uh, what I mean to say is that the similarly situated creditors shall be treated equally, and the financial creditor and the operational creditor can be treated differentially, as we have seen through the jurisprudence laid down in the matter of SR Limited. So I think with this, I would like to conclude my session. I'm happy to take questions for like next 10 minutes.
Thank you so much, ma'am. This was very informative. Now we'll just switch on to any questions which everyone has or anyone has. Please, if anyone wants to ask any question, please type it out in your chat box.
म्यूट करो ना, नहीं देखो तो पापा ही म्यूट कर दो, कोई नहीं है.
If anyone has any question, please type that on the chat box.
If you want to ask any question, whatever I have told or deliberated during my session, I'm happy to answer that too. If you had no clarity about what I mentioned in my session or something, I think one question which I received to exaggerate on section 53, subsection B, clause B, subclause, okay, Roman 2. I'll just go ahead and deal with that once again. Is there any other question? So I have a question in which somebody is asking me to deliberate upon subclause B of section 53. Can you be more specific as to what question do you have it in your mind so that I can clarify it directly? Because I would not like to elaborate on this much before I take up any other question. So if you could just be more specific to what question. So I have a question, if everyone can listen to this. Are the employees of the company treated as operational creditors? Yes, of course. The employees of the company are treated as an operational creditor, definitely. So they can initiate CIRP against the company if they have, I think there was some judgment in this regard, and I think you need to go through the judgment in which it is said that the employee, so I remember one matter that is Surendra Joshi versus Ray Agro Limited. It was the matter of NCLT Kolkata, and it was initiated. However, later on it was detected that there is some discrepancy with the claim. So I think you will have to just read on the latest judgment with this regard. Otherwise, the employees are treated as the operational creditor. That is a settled law of position. So I have another question which says, does all operational debt have a liquidation value? I did not get this question. Like, does all operational debt have a liquidation value payable to them, or they are ought to receive it? if that you can clarify, I'll be happy to answer that question. I'll deal with the next question, which says, doesn't section 53 divide creditors into category of secured and unsecured creditors and not creditors and operational creditors? Absolutely, as I have dealt with this issue while explaining section 53, in which I happened to mention one line in which I said that the secured creditor might be an operational creditor too, and they also might be treated at before the financial creditors who are unsecured in nature are treated and paid. So therefore, it is a section it is a section which deals with secured and unsecured creditors, absolutely. Regarding relinquishing rights and something you said about benefits. Yeah, all right. So I will just deal with that issue quickly, and I'll clarify all your doubts, whatever you have it in your mind. I'll just like to share my screen for that, or else I'll just take this. I hope, if I'm not mistaken, this is the part in which I need to deal in detail. This is the code which says debts owed to a secured creditor in the event such secured creditor has relinquished security in the manner set out in 52. So what does 52 provides? 52 provides like a secured creditor in the liquidation proceedings may have two options: either to relinquish their security interest to the liquidation estate and receive the proceeds from the sale of assets by the liquidator in the manner specified in 53, or realize its security interest in the manner specified in this section. What does it do? Say for example, if a financial creditor is there and it has a security interest in the form of an immovable property, that is land, building, and other operational facilities, and it has also movable assets like plant and machinery and everything, and therefore a charge is created on these properties and a form is filed for creating such charge on the MCA portal, which is the Ministry of Corporate Affairs portal. And as per the provisions of Companies Act 2013, whoever registers its charge against the corporate debtor, it is reflected on the public portal. Then, if a financial creditor registers its charge against the corporate debtor and there exists a security interest in the form of a charge. Therefore, when the liquidation proceeding commence in the matter of a corporate debtor, what does happen then? Then the liquidator actually it is by the operation of law that a secured creditor, either a financial or an operational creditor who has the security interest or who has security against the company, can have may have two options. Either it relinquishes its security interest, that means whatever charge it holds against the company in the form of immovable property, movable property, anything of that sort, to the liquidator. Relinquishes means छोड़ देता है, मतलब it releases its security interest to the liquidator and it adheres to the provisions of the code and says that when you realize the proceeds from the liquidation estate, then I am entitled to be paid according to section 53 of the code, which ranks them on the I think they rank third from the waterfall mechanism, after being the insolvency resolution cost, liquidation cost, and the wages to the workmen are paid. They are then paid in accordance with section 53. And if they do not relinquish their security interest, that is to say that they do not continue with the basically they do not continue to adhere to the provisions of the code, and they opt out, that means they take out their security interest. That means the value of such immovable property and everything goes off from the liquidation estate, and the liquidator releases those security interests to in favor of the secured financial creditor or secured operational creditor who holds the security interest exclusively. Take out that security interest, and then you go off in the market and sell it through your private channels, and those are not sold by the liquidator. Therefore, it means to opt out of the liquidation proceedings and you sell it on your own, and then you are not treated at parity, who basically has relinquished their interest to the liquidator. So basically there are two things: either you relinquish to the liquidator or you don't relinquish to the liquidator and you sell it on your own. Your security interest, you take it out of the liquidation proceedings and you sell it through your private auction. Therefore, whatever you realize, if it is still not recovered, that means your loan is not recovered fully, then you will be paid in accordance with the waterfall provided in the under section 53 at the later point in time. How can they be sold? As in, what about moratorium? So they have to follow the procedure under section 52, and then the assets are released in their favor, and then they opt out of the liquidation proceedings, and once they opt out of the liquidation proceedings, there cannot be question of moratorium on those assets. I would now like to deal with the other issues that I am facing here. I've just explained section 53b2 again. I mean, how do we say what is the liquidation value of, say, employed dues? So the liquidation value is basically, how do you determine the liquidation value? Your sale proceeds minus your expected expenses. That is your liquidation value, and the realizable value of the assets. How do you, pay it off to the creditors and everything? So generally, operational creditors will not have any liquidation value at the end, and they will not be paid anything. And that is why all the operational creditors, in the sake of their interest, are to be treated in a resolution plan itself when the resolution plan is being approved by the COC. Then why is there a discrepancy with respect to the priority in case of payments of financial creditors and operational creditors? I mean, if section 53 divides them into secured and unsecured creditors and not FC. So the earlier concept which I was dealing with is financial creditor and operational creditor. That was while the resolution plan is being approved by the COC and then the adjudicating authority. However, section 53 is hit once the liquidation period starts under the CIRP. So there is no discrepancy as regard in payment to financial creditor and operational creditor under section 53. However, there was a discrepancy before SR in terms of payment of secured and unsecured financial creditors or operational creditors under the resolution plans, because nobody wants to take the haircut, nobody wants to take the actually pain of letting go of their financial interest or anything.
I think we don't have any more questions, ma'am. Like,
so
I
just had one question, like, then why is there a discrepancy with respect to the priority in respect of in case of payments of financial creditor and operational creditor? I mean, if section 53 divides them into secured and unsecured financial creditor and not FCs and OCs. I think this I have already dealt in. So if somebody has any question,
Yeah.
they can write to me on my email.
Definitely, I'll share the email once the session is over, ma'am.